The weight of the world can feel so heavy when you're caring for not one, but multiple family members with Alzheimer's disease. The emotional, physical, and financial toll is multiplied. But you're not alone. On this episode today, I talked to Sandra, a lovely woman who cared for multiple family members with Alzheimer's. She's going to give us some strategies, tell us her story. You're going to feel better just by tuning in. Welcome to Fading Memories, a podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving together. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. Caregivers are always hearing they need to take care of themselves. Ha! Easier said than done, right? But I have a way you can give yourself a better night's sleep. You know how important sleep is to brain health, so let me introduce you to Cozy Earth bamboo sheets. I got a set for my birthday back in November, and let me tell you, I sleep cooler and better than I have in a long time. These sheets are super luxurious. Just what I need after a busy day of doing all I can to support family caregivers. This Valentine's Day, wrap your loved one and yourself in the luxury you both deserve with Cozy Earth. Visit cozyearth.com and use my exclusive 40% off code MEMORIES for a heck of a deal. Oh, and if you get a post-purchase survey, say you heard about Cozy Earth from Fading Memories, I'd appreciate it, because nothing says I love you like Cozy Earth comfort. Welcome back, listeners. Well, I've got a doozy of a story for you today. I don't know how many of you are caring for multiple family members with Alzheimer's or other form of dementia. I pretty much got to do mine one at a time. But with me is Sandra Kaiser. She took care of her mother and her brother, and between them, she also had a couple of uncles with the disease, and I think it was an aunt.
Correct.
So she's well versed on Alzheimer's caregiving, and she's here to tell her story and give us some tips and strategies. So thanks for joining me, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening. Or
Welcome.
afternoon where you are,
Yeah,
right?
wherever you listen or whenever you listen. So why don't you start with telling us about you and your family and how this conversation came to be happening today?
Sure. So my Alzheimer's journey started in October 2001. I had moved from Detroit to Orlando. My job relocated me here. And I learned once I arrived that my aunt was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my mom's sister-in-law. So she lived 10 years after her diagnosis. And I would say my role with her was more of moral support, although I would go visit my uncle if he needed to run out. I may sit with her. And eventually he ended up putting her in a nursing home because they were both older. And she got to the point where she started to wander during the evenings. So I would visit her at the nursing home if when she got to the point where she may need help with food. I would help feed her. So that was my introduction to Alzheimer's. Fast forward a few years, my brother noticed that my mom started to forget things, and he seemed to think that there was something wrong with her memory. And so, after a series of tests, um, when my aunt was making her transition, we learned that my mom had Alzheimer's. So that I always look back and I say that was my Alzheimer's in training with my aunt, even though I had no idea. It's not something you look forward to, but that was the first thing that popped in my head once we got the diagnosis that my mom had Alzheimer's. So that was late 2010. They were still doing testing with her and suspected Alzheimer's, but 2011 was when we got the official diagnosis, April 2011. And then I had a brother who was diagnosed with early onset, and my sister-in-law noticed this was probably around the same time that my mom was diagnosed, she started to notice that things were seemed a little bit off with him. And then in 2012, she shared a story with me where she had given him the mortgage payment. She was out of town for work. He called, he was frantic, he didn't know what he did with it. And once she returned home, he didn't even remember having a conversation with her. So at that point, she knew something was wrong. So initially, the doctors were thinking there was something with Lyme disease because I guess there are some symptoms that can mimic Alzheimer's, some Lyme disease symptoms that can mimic Alzheimer's. So after numerous tests, numerous doctors visit back and forth, he was diagnosed with early onset. And so I would travel back and forth home to help with my mom. My brother was still in, let me back up. My brother was still in good condition considering things. He could drive, he could do a lot of the things that people with, in the early stages still can take care of for themselves. So, but my mom, when she was diagnosed, hers was a little bit more advanced and she was older. So I would travel back and forth from Orlando to Montgomery. I had signed up for FMLA so I could work part-time, help with her care part-time. And I did that from 2011 until 2015. And I thought, oh, maybe I need to move home. So I thought about it and I made preparations. So I relocated to Montgomery in 2016 so I could be there and it would be less strenuous on me going back and forth and working. And so I was going to quit my job and find something there. And my manager reached out and she said, I talked to my manager and we'd love to keep you on. So I worked part-time when I moved to Montgomery, while my mom was still alive. And once I got there, she lived about 6 weeks after I moved. And so I initially thought, gosh, I don't really want to move back. I just really just picked up and moved everything. So I stayed and then I started back working full time. But I was there to be able to help with my brother's care, with my sister-in-law. But we were really blessed. We had a family friend. She worked with my sister, who's a nurse. She was a caregiver. She would work part-time. She would come from like 10 to 2. So when I would work until she came in the morning. And then well, actually, I would help with my mom before she came. And then when she arrived, then I would work and then she would be there. And then by the time she would leave, some of my siblings or nieces and nephews would come over to kind of fill in the gap so I could finish working. So we did that. And then I was able to help with my brother's care after my mom's passing. And because he was still able to do a lot of things, he didn't require as much attention initially, but then it seemed to start to progress like rather quickly. I'm not sure if that's because of my mom's death and the impact that that may have had on him, or because he was younger. I'm not sure. I've heard some people say, I'm not sure if this is fact, that sometimes when people are younger, they seem to like advance more quickly with the disease. I'm not sure if there's any truth to that, but he did. My mom died in 2017, January, and he died in June 2019. So it wasn't long after, but that's kind of how my story unfolded. And then after both of them passed, I wanted to share my story in a book, and I thought, don't really want to do this now. But it was the start of the pandemic, and someone that I went to church with here in Orlando, everything was online. She did a writing challenge, and I thought, wow, I should participate in it. And I did. And so that's how I wrote my book, dedicated to my mom and brother. And I didn't want to do it, but sometimes God moves differently than you do. So I wrote the book and dedicated it to them, just sharing my journey and things about caregiving. But I will share that one of the things that I learned during that whole process was to be patient. And I coined this phrase, pack your patience, because a lot of times you'll get frustrated by some of the things they do. And I had to remind myself, they don't know what's going on. You do. So you need to be the bigger person here. So I had to tell myself, pack your patience. It's going to be okay. Just calm down. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you need to do to calm yourself down, because you don't want to frustrate them, or you don't want to agitate them, or you don't want them to see that you are frustrated, because even though they have the disease, they still have some mental capabilities about them. And you don't want them to think like you don't want to care for them, like I'm annoying you or I'm a burden to you. So I have to tell myself, pack your patience. And I always tell people, be flexible, because sometimes there are folks who want to help you. And, we are controlling. Most of us, we like to do things the way we like to do them, and we want them done how we want them done. But when people can offer support to you, take the help, whatever time it is, however small amount of time it is, just accept it, and don't be so confined to a routine where if somebody can come for 30 minutes and you say, no, I need an hour, never mind. No, take the 30 minutes, because you'll really appreciate it later. If even if you have to step outside, scream or whatever, just take a walk. You'll appreciate it. So those are the things that I learned, to really be patient, be flexible, and just kind of go with the flow with the patient. Follow their lead. You can kind of sense where they are and what their needs are. And so that's one of the things I had to do, is learn to kind of be flexible with my mom and kind of sense what was going on with her. Like, no, you may want to go here and do this, but no, let's just sit here and talk, and take that time to soak up all those stories that you can when they are able to talk. That's one of the things I appreciated with her, going back and forth before I moved, just her sharing stories about her life and just being able to gather that information. And it was actually helpful to me in the book, even though I had no idea that was forthcoming.
Did you ever find any of those stories where you're like, I wonder if this is true or if she's mixed up dates and facts and stuff? Because I've talked to people who get stories from a loved one. They're like, I don't think this is true. Just it could be something like, adopted out sibling, or something like, I don't want to say scandalous, but something along those lines, or
Right.
just stories that sound true, but it's you have a hard time. Like, I've never heard this story before. I wonder if it's true. Did you run across anything like that?
I did. I wondered about some things, but I was able to talk to like other people in my family, and they could confirm it. And with my mom, when I was traveling back and forth, the stories that she shared, she could still remember things. And some stuff I knew, I'm like, oh, she talked about that before. And she even got to the point where she would say to me, she said, oh, I told you that, didn't I? And I said, yeah, but it's okay. You can tell me again. But for the things, a few stories, a couple of them where I was like, I didn't know that. I would ask my uncle, who was here in Orlando, her brother, and he would tell me, yeah, that happened. He was older than her, so he could confirm stuff. He never, had any problems with his memory, but he confirmed some things that my mom shared with me, and he even actually went into more detail. I'm sure she shared as much as she could based upon where she was in terms of her cognitive skills. But yeah, there were a couple things, and I'm like, I never heard that before. And when I would get back home from visiting with her, I would ask him, Uncle Ben, did you ever hear this? He was like, yeah, baby, that's true. And I said, okay. Glad I didn't challenge her on some stuff, because that can be frustrating to them too. That's another thing I learned, just go with the flow, because when you try to correct them on something, it can be frustrating to them and for you, because now they're gonna keep remembering that moment,
Yep.
and it may be 2 hours later, and it's like, Why did you think I didn't know this? So that's something I learned. I'm like, ooh, I think I messed up there.
And they seem to somehow remember the emotion. Like my mom
Right.
couldn't remember what she'd had for lunch 10 minutes ago, but she was really clear on my dad giving away her car to my brother-in-law. Still pissed her off. It's
Was
like,
that a true story?
yeah,
Oh,
she would
good.
out of the blue comment, she thought I was her best friend, which
Hmm.
I took as basically an upgrade. Um, I had suspicions that she didn't recognize me as her daughter because I'd lost a tremendous amount of weight, so it made logical sense. So I missed the emotional smack of realizing that she didn't remember who I was,
Hmm.
because I suspected, and then I confirmed it. I confirmed it on my birthday in 2017, which was that's a whole story. But she thought I was her best friend, so she would talk about her husband, and she always talked about him with a snide tone of voice. It was frustrating. I mean, they had a cantankerous relationship, but she'd be like, "My husband rah, 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 gave away my car
Yeah.
to my son-in-law." Rah, rah. It was like, I don't even remember when that happened, but she did. Oh, she was very clear on that. So yeah, it's it's better not to do things that are gonna upset them, or
Right.
like you said, challenge them, because they may not have a clue why they're mad at you, but dang it, they want to pick a fight with you because they're
Oh,
mad at you.
yeah.
And you're like, what the heck? Where's it? Like, why is this anger coming at me all of a sudden? It might be a day later or a couple days later, and you're like, WTF? What the hell?
They move very fast too. That's one thing I noticed with my mom. I'd be talking to her and I'm like, where did she go? Then I said, Mama, where were you? She was like, I'm right here. As if to say, like, I was here the whole time. Like, what's wrong with you? But they move quickly,
That's
very
interesting. My
fast.
mom moved slowly. So that is
Yeah.
interesting. And to go back, I do believe that people with younger onset Alzheimer's generally progress faster, but I have a past guest. The original title of the episode was Slow Puncture, but algorithms force me to change the title sometimes, so I can't guarantee it's still the title. He was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's at 50, and we're recording this on November 7th. He just celebrated a birthday, either the 5th or the 6th. Lucky for him, he's in Britain, so he's a British gentleman, so he didn't have to
Hmm.
deal with our November 5th stuff. And
Yeah.
he's still doing pretty well, but slow puncture is in reference to cycling, and he does cycling for dementia awareness, and it's obviously kept him healthy because he does better in the morning. Because when we recorded, they're like, his riding partner said, well, Peter's better in the morning, can we record in the morning, which I have no problem with, but I'm in California and he was in Great Britain. That's an 8 hour difference to start with. So
Yeah.
I had breakfast, brushed my hair, threw on some makeup, my own club cycling jersey, and recorded with him, and then finished my normal morning routine. And it was getting trickier for him, but yeah, I do think the younger onset Alzheimer's generally has a faster progression, but of course everybody's different, so
True.
only it's only going to apply to the people who aren't listening today, right?
Right, right.
And then you were also talking about patience, and one of the things that I teach and have learned through guests is, well, I'm a community educator with the Alzheimer's Association. And so one of the topics that I teach is dealing with, typical dementia behaviors. And one of them is, like aggression. And one of the things is, if you get impatient with them, or you have a body language that expresses exasperation or frustration, that it can trigger a really negative reaction. And I have a past guest, I have lots of past guests who her husband had Alzheimer's. He was asking the same question, every 2 or 3 minutes. He got to about the fifth time and she sighed and rolled her eyes and then answered again. She answered in a nice tone of voice, but she turned and looked at him, and the expression on his face, she said, was like she had slapped him. and vowed right then and there she was never going to do anything that would put that look on his face. And so she just came up with the mantra that if he could remember, he wouldn't ask. And he didn't ask to have Alzheimer's disease. So I think she was successful on not making him feel like he'd been verbally slapped.
Mhm.
He had a fairly quick progression, but he was older. So the Alzheimer's Association also recommends a mantra. So I like your pack your patience because
Yeah.
that's memorable. Her mantra was a little wordy, didn't roll off the tongue, but it worked for her. So everybody has to come up with their own.
Right.
So you essentially went from 2001 to 2019 with at least some family member that needed help. Is that correct? Did I get the dates
That,
right?
yes, that is correct.
Yikes, 20 years. So my mom had Alzheimer's for, excuse me, probably about 20 years, but obviously she had a pretty slow progression. So we would hit she would progress and then stay there for a long time. So it was almost expected, but still surprising when another dip came. And it wasn't, well, she was really good about not being diagnosed. We knew she had something going on, and she went to donate a kidney to my dad in 2008 and was rejected because of cognitive problems. And so I
Mhm.
thought, finally, we have a diagnosis. It wasn't actually until fall of 2011. So my mom was diagnosed well after yours, and I had known
Wow.
for years. By that point, it was like, duh. Like a blind person, a deaf person would know she's got something going on. So,
Right.
so how did you, what kind of strategies do you have for, because you were traveling back and forth. And I know in our planning chat, you said that you worked remotely before the pandemic. So that probably helped. But how did you juggle everything? Because that's one thing that a lot of us caregivers have to do is juggle family and careers and caregiving and just seems never ending.
Well, I do have a large family. I come from a family of 12, so there are lots of siblings. Three of us are outstate, but the rest of them are there. So we had a team of people, and that's one of the things that I always tell people as a caregiver for any illness, I would say build your team. And so we had a schedule of who's going to do what during what day. That made it easier, but me working part-time was actually helpful too. So 4 hours out of the day, I had time to devote to helping with her care. And then those other 4 hours, there was someone else there who could fill in the gap. And then I could take my lunch hour if she had a quick, close doctor's appointment. I could take time to do that. And the other thing about working remotely and that flexibility, if I needed to work later, I could because I was already remote. So if I had to work at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, I can make up the time that I had used to take her to an appointment or something like that. But it was easier, I think, because having a team. Definitely, if it was just me and my brother, it would have been more difficult. But I had siblings, nieces and nephews who pitched in, especially like on Saturday. Saturdays were the days where I kind of had to myself, so to speak, at least part of the day, because others would come in and help out. So that made it easier. So definitely build your team so that you're not the only one, or you're not, and ask for help. I think that's another thing. Sometimes as caregivers, we don't ask for help because we know that other people are trying to live their lives and we don't want to bother them. But I say bother them because when you become overwhelmed, then you become frustrated. You're no good to yourself. You're no good to the person you're trying to help care for. So make sure you ask for help when you need it. As I mentioned earlier, if it's 30 minutes, take it. If that's all someone can offer, take it. Don't be so stubborn and say, well, if you can't do this, then forget it. No, take the help that you can get because we are all busy. We have a lot of things going on in our lives. So I would take every little nugget. Okay, if that's what you can do, then fine. I'll be right back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
30 minutes and then little 5-minute snippets that caregivers can take. I
yeah.
regularly share those in my email newsletter. Take 5 minutes, go outside, get the sun on your face, breathe some fresh
Hmm.
air, enjoy some nature. I live in the low Sierra foothills, the Sierra Nevada foothills, and
Hmm.
frequently the deer are walking through my yard. The Like I said, this is November 7th when we're recording this. My husband took my Halloween pumpkin that, because it spent 3 days in the house, was looking pretty bad by November 1st,
Hmm.
and chucked it onto the lawn because there's plenty of critters. There's turkeys, there's critters galore. And he figured, well, instead of putting it in the trash can and like making, you know, greenhouse gases that aren't good for the planet. Why don't I just give it to the animals? And I went on the deck to do something, and there's this beautiful deer just chomping away, and there's a bunny hopping through the yard. I was like, wow, this is almost like a Disney movie. And it was just, 2 or 3 minutes of just appreciating nature and just the spark of an idea to throw the pumpkin to the critters. It's just
Right.
like, it was awesome. It's amazing how the little 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, getting a lot done, getting a lot accomplished, or not getting frustrated, patting yourself on the back really can, it's almost as good as having a whole day off. Maybe not quite as good, but it's better than nothing. So
Right.
I wanted to ask, so you have a big family. I've talked to people who are like one of five, and you've got the
Mhm.
one who does 90% of the care, one that helps out. Then there's the sibling that's like, I don't want to see mom like this. I don't want to remember her like this. I take it you didn't have any of that with any of you?
No, there were some, but we didn't focus on the ones who didn't help or chose not to help for whatever reason. Those of us who stepped in, for the most part, it was the majority of them. But you always have like a few stragglers. We didn't, well, I should say I could speak for myself. I didn't focus on those. I'm like, okay, the ones that want to help, then here's what we're gonna do. And you keep it moving because there is so much care that they need. I feel like you don't have time to be worried about somebody who's, I don't want to see her like this, or why don't we do this? Why don't we, can she come to my house? Then, yeah, no. Because I know that when you take them out of their environment, it makes it more difficult for them. They're already confused where they are. So I didn't worry about people who didn't step up their game. I just, accepted the help that was offered and kept it moving. I found that was easier and more beneficial for my own mental health because you got to think about yourself as well and make sure you take care of yourself.
Yeah, because if you go down, you know, that's like pulling the leg off of a tripod. It's like now the whole support system crumbles, and that's not helping anybody.
Yeah, kind
And
of
it's
like my ring light that I dropped just before we got on. I'm like, great, and cracked the top of it so it's taped up over there, but it's working.
just keep on trucking, right? It's
Right.
it's not unusual, and I think this must be like personality based. My mom was the oldest of four. The sibling number two had, and I say this with all respect, was always a wimp.
Mm-hmm.
Was in the Navy, and he and my aunt married very young. She was 18. He had to go home once with no paycheck because he was not brave enough to get his vaccinations. And they were like,
Mm-hmm.
no vaccinations, no paycheck. And she drug him back there and got those vaccinations. And when my grandfather was dying from cancer, she stepped in and took his place. So it was like the four of them would take a week at a time to care for my grandfather. And my grandmother at the time also had, well, she had vascular dementia. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
double whammy for all of them. But yeah, it's just like, it seems very normal that there's somebody in the family that they just can't cope. It's not that they're bad people,
Right.
and so the way you handled it is the best way. It's kind of how I recommend people, it's like, you're not going to change them, so don't bang your head on the wall because that isn't going to do any good.
At all. You're
So
gonna have a headache and you still have to get the work
yeah, for
done.
real. not good for your brain health to bang your head on the wall. Don't be doing that. So, what kind of things did you do when you had the time? Well, yeah, when you had the time off, what did you do to help take care of yourself? Because that's a long
Well,
stretch. I can relate.
yeah. So my family lives on a lot of land, so I could walk. My dad had dug a pond some years ago. I'm not into fishing, but just being able to walk and just watch nature, like you say, that was always helpful. And then there were those trips to Starbucks that were beneficial. Go sit outside, enjoy a frappuccino. I would sometimes take my brother. He would get a strawberry refresher. I would get a frappuccino. We'd sit and we'd talk and laugh about things. So a lot of times we would come back home and sit on his porch because I know that that was a place of comfort for him. So Starbucks was close, like 10 minutes away or so. So we'd come back and sit and just talk and laugh. And we had a neighbor who would visit a lot. Sometimes he would come over and he would talk. And as my brother would say, "Oh, here he comes telling more lies." So, there were was a lot of laughter, which I appreciated. And so those days when I don't feel as motivated or encouraged, I think about those moments of laughter that he had. And that gets me through. But definitely taking walks, sometimes just reading or just sitting and relaxing, not doing anything, just taking that moment to just relax and not look at a computer screen.
I can relate to the not looking at a computer screen today. As I told Sandra earlier, this is my third Zoom call today. And between my light and the screen, my eyeballs are getting tired. So,
Wait, there's another Sandra?
no, I was telling you before we hit
Oh, you were
record.
telling me. Oh,
Yeah.
you were telling me you did third person. I was like, wait.
Yes, it's not something I do often because it's surprisingly fatiguing. But
Yeah,
one, I haven't done a recording for like a week or two. I don't know what's going on. I think people took the election week off or something. Halloween
yeah,
and the election all happened, so
just
there was a
like
little
a
bit of
blur.
slack, which is it's okay because I got caught up on a whole bunch of stuff it was bubbling over on the back burner. So there was one other
Yeah.
question I was going to ask about, your remote job. Was it always a remote job or did they help because this was before the pandemic when people even really had a clue what remote jobs were, right?
Right. It was 2016. It
Yeah,
was
that was way before people knew about
mhm.
remote jobs.
Yeah, before we knew there was going to be a pandemic. Yeah, it was, yeah, 2016, December when I moved. That's when I started working remote. And I did that for 3 years. And when I came back to Orlando in May 2020, everybody was remote. So it wasn't difficult, to make that transition and adjustment because I had been doing it for, the past 3 years, 3.5 years.
Because I find it really disappointing that I thought we learned during the pandemic that people could be just as productive, if not more so, working from home if that was what they wanted. I think hybrid
Mm,
methods are fine, but this, back to the office mandates really frustrates me because
mm,
corporations are already losing money because of elder care, and they're obviously not aware of it because I'm trying to work to make them aware. So I know that's the
yeah.
case. And these back to office mandates are going the wrong direction, especially with employees like ourselves that are a little bit older, a little middle aged, right?
Hmm.
Like you said, you could, take your mom to a doctor's appointment, which those things are never quick, and then pick up your work later on in the evening. Whereas, if you had to go into an office 9 to 5, it's hard to squeeze in that stuff. And, neurologists and those guys, they're not there on Saturdays because that's not what they have to do. So
Right.
it's frustrating that we're going the wrong direction. I'm hoping to fix that. So I hope people that are listening realize that remote work is an option that they are going to have to offer if they want to keep talented employees like yourself. Like you said, your employer asked you to stick with them. They would work with you because they understood the value of keeping you versus trying to find somebody equally as good to replace you. I'm sure that would have been really difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate it not having to look for employment. So that was good. It was a blessing to both of us, actually. So, but I was thankful for that. But that wasn't my priority because I'm like, okay, I could tell like on that last trip home, she was declining more. So I'm like, you better get there if you're going to spend those final days. So I'm glad that I did. That's something that I will always be grateful for, having made that decision to just like, okay, this is what you need to do. But I did plan a year out. So it's not like I just said, okay, tomorrow I'm moving to Montgomery. I planned out a year, like this is what I need to do so I can be prepared. So
And that probably made that transition a bit easier because
yeah,
I'm sure
it
there's
did.
days when it was hard to find the gratitude in making a cross state move. Moving's not ever easy, that has to be harder. For her to pass away after 6 weeks, it's like, I did all this stuff and it was only for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I felt like that. I was like, are you kidding me? And then like I was home like a week and I had a brother um who had an accident, ATV accident and died on Christmas like a week after I got home and I thought, you gotta be kidding me. Are you serious? And then like another 5 weeks she's gone and I'm thinking, okay, there's gotta be something that God is trying to teach me here. I don't know what it is. I don't even know if I agree with it right now, but I'm gonna hang in there.
Yeah, that has to be really hard.
Yeah.
I can't imagine losing somebody on Christmas suddenly has got to be challenging. We lost a friend on Christmas Eve 2019, and it kind of refocused some of my thoughts on where I was, what I wanted to do. We had a really huge house, and it was on a golf course, and they closed the golf course. And we
Mhm.
finally had equity, and it was kind of like, fortunately, our timing was a little off, so we downsized, sold that house in January of 2020. Really wish we'd waited 6 months, but it had a really big mortgage and it was interest only, so we were never getting ahead on that. It was just like, this is stupid. And after he died, I was like, it's just a house. Like the memories are in my
Mhm.
head. It's like the
Right.
stuff doesn't matter, the walls don't matter. And you know that was nice because then we lived in a temporary house rental for the 2 years of the pandemic, and then we moved up to the Sierra foothills, and that was a whole different change of life. So sometimes I
Yeah.
wonder about moving 2 hours away from my only kid, but for the most part, it's been okay. But yeah, it's just sometimes you got to wonder. But we at least got to sell my mom's house during the height of the pandemic.
Did you?
I still just still am just gobsmacked is the perfect term for what we sold her house for. It was, let me think. They bought it in, so it was like 50 years old. They bought it, it was built in 1970 and we sold it in 2020. So somebody else is going to have to do the math. I don't have enough fingers for that one.
Yeah.
And it was just, ugh. So we rented it out to cover the care home that she lived in, which was one thing I
Mhm.
was going to ask you. You said your aunt ended up in a nursing home. Was it a nursing home or memory care?
No, it was a nursing home. Like I said, my uncle, it got to the point where he wasn't able to get the rest that he needed at night to help take care of her because she started to wander and even open the door. So he realized he didn't want to do it, but that was the best option considering where she was in the disease. But he was at the nursing home every day, twice a day. They never knew when he was coming, so they got to know him. And I will never forget there was a gentleman who was in the nursing home. His name was Stephen. Stephen was in a wheelchair. I don't know that he had family or if they visited him, but we got to know him like going back and forth. And if my uncle got there first, he would roll up front. I swear I believe this man would look out the window to see who was coming in. He'd say, he's already down there. Or if I was down there, if I beat my uncle to the nursing home on a Saturday, Stephen would go up front and he would meet my uncle and say, tell him that I was there. And when my uncle would come to the room, he would say, Stephen told me you were here. So, I mean, we just got to know Stephen and build a relationship with him. And that was just something that I remember. And I was like, you never know, like, the impact you have on people because, like I said, I never saw any of his family visit him. So he would come to the room where my aunt was, and he would sit with us and talk. And he would always have this big box of, I can't remember, I think it was either vanilla wafers or Oreos. And if you ask Stephen for a cookie, he'll say, I don't got no more. And he was, my uncle would say, you are a stingy joker. But that made his day. Like he would just laugh and then he would just roll out. He would hang out with us. And I always thought, wow, maybe he doesn't have anybody. And that's his moment of, fellowshipping with somebody who paid attention to him. So, yeah, I remember Stephen like it was yesterday.
I have similar memories of the friends that my mom made in memory care. My mom lived in memory care for 3 years and 2 weeks. And she, because I was 50 when my dad passed away, and my photography business was attached to my house, and we backed up to open space, and my mom instinctively understood that she was mom. When my dad was in the hospital, she stayed with us for a little while, and it was abundantly obvious. Like, it didn't take too many brain cells clicking together to realize her moving in with me would have been horrible for everybody, including her, which my dad just assumed that was what was going to happen. We never had a conversation about that, which still irritates out of me. And I knew my mom didn't, my mom wanted to live in her home forever, but she didn't want to be a burden to me. I'm like, well, thank you. Those are mutually exclusive. So I made the decision to put her in memory care. And that was really hard because I knew I was not doing what she wanted, but I also knew that it was the best thing for her. And my mom, whose name was Diane, befriended Diane S., and the two Dianes then befriended Diane R. So we had Diane, and other Diane, because Holy Toledo is like really complicated to keep them straight with a normal brain. But they would chat and do things with each other. I mean, she really had a pretty good life the last 3 years in memory care. Was it perfect? No. I like to tell the story of the resident klepto. That woman, holy moly, that's a whole other podcast
I think I
episode.
remember you sharing with me about, was
Yeah.
it a rug that you said? Was
Oh,
it a
the
rug?
rug. So my mom had her dog with her the first 18 months of memory care. And because every time the dog would look at my mom or eventually any of the other residents, they would all feed her. So the dog was double an ideal weight, which prevented proper doggy hygiene. That's enough said on that topic.
I follow.
Yeah. So the area rug that I had put down in my mom's room was somewhat soiled. When they renovated the entire community and the executive director beat around the bush so hard, it was almost hard not to laugh at him. He never asked me to rehome the dog, but I got that message loud and clear. And it was kind of becoming the appropriate choice for mom and the dog anyway. So we tried to clean the rug. That was hopeless. So we put in a different rug that was a little smaller, but it was a cream background with great big plate-sized button pattern. And my mom had been a seamstress. So my mom and Diane S. literally talked about this rug for an hour. I mean, I was so grateful that I did not have to discuss this rug because listening to them talk about this rug for almost an hour was brain melting. But it was interesting because they were like talking about how it could be a wall hanging it was actually kind of interesting, but then they just kept repeating themselves. So the next time I went and visited my mom, the rug was gone. And I asked the memory care director, where mom's rug was, and she rolled her eyes and went, "Oh dear." And I'm like, "Oh, that
Oh,
good, huh?" She said, when we take the residents to dinner, let's go look in Diane S's room." And there it was, rolled up, kind of shoved behind a chair. And I was, it was a 5 foot by 7 foot rug. It wasn't light. I mean, I'm sure I could have
mhm.
carried it alone, but I can just imagine these two old ladies rolling up this rug and carting it down the hall. And I'm like, why? Why are
Oh
we
my
doing
gosh.
it? And Diane S. always seemed to end up with other people's clothes. She wasn't a klepto, not like Rose. Rose was,
Mhm.
if she put her eyeballs on it, it belonged to her. And that happened with my mom's
Don't turn
dog.
your head. Don't
Oh
turn your
Lordy. There was one day
head.
she eyeballed my purse, and man, I did one of them TV stunt woman dives to get to my purse before she did, because I knew that if she got her hand on the strap, we were going to have a big problem because, first off, I don't want to be having a wrestling match over my purse with a poor old woman who is shorter than me, which is a challenge because I'm only 5'2". Like I didn't want to be, causing any elder abuse, but she was, whew, that purse would have been gone. And I don't know how I would have gotten home with no keys. So yeah, she was wild. But yeah, Diane S., when her daughters moved her out, she got really paranoid. And I don't know if they ran out of money, or I never saw them. I took Diane S., we would go to the regional park, the three of us. I'd take them to the nail salon. What else did we do? We'd go all over the place. It was almost easier to take the two of them than just have
Mhm.
my mom. But yeah, Diane
Um,
S. got really paranoid, and when they moved her out, there was about, I don't know, 10 to 12 medium-sized trash bags full of other people's clothes.
wow.
So I don't know. I don't know how she managed that. But yeah, these are just kind of the
Somehow,
wild stories from memory care that I'm desperately trying to write down as a book, because,
yeah.
like you said with Steven, it's like there's not it's not as horrible as people think.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's a defense mechanism, like, or I don't know. I don't understand. Like, just go and look. I mean, they're horrifically expensive. That's a giant problem. And the staff is not paid. Like if you're paying 8 grand a month, they should be like driving up in new Accords at least, right?
Right.
No, the caregivers were not paid very well. There was a mom and a daughter that worked there. The husband slash dad lived there for a while. They would work at Starbucks for 8 hours and then do the second shift at the care home for another 8 hours. I'm like, I don't know how you do 8 hours with these crazy people.
Mhm.
That's a figurative term, not a literal
Right,
term.
right. I got you.
And I couldn't do 8 hours at Starbucks or here. I couldn't do both, Lord. So I was always appreciative of all of that, what they did. But yeah, we need a reshuffle on how all that works, how it's funded, and how people get paid. But I can only
Right.
tackle so many challenges.
Yeah, one little tackle of one task at a time. Yeah.
So maybe can you give people a quick suggestion on how to handle, like you had many years of caregiving, either intermittent or, pretty hands-on. How do you regain your life afterwards? That's probably a whole other show.
Um, I think after it's over, then you're processing the loss. So that took some time. What didn't help was the pandemic because you were confined. You couldn't even get out and really like do a lot of things. But certainly I would say once you well, actually not once you, but allow yourself time to grieve, like once you experience that loss, and then hold on to those memories, and then just gradually get back into doing those things that you enjoy doing. That's why I always say too, when you spend that time with your loved ones, well, when you find out, okay, they have Alzheimer's or some other type of dementia, sit down with them and just have conversations to so they can share those stories, because the sooner you do it, the better for you, because then you have those memories to hold on to. And I'm not sure how people address that when there's like a relationship challenge, but I would say try to do it anyway, because you know that eventually they're going to get to the point where they're not going to be able to remember, they're not going to be able to speak, and they
Mm-hmm.
won't be here anymore. So take advantage of the time to get those stories in your head or even on paper if that's what you need to do. For me, I remembered them and then I was able to put them on paper. If looking back, I would have written more down because I would have remembered more. Because I'm sure there was some stuff Mama told me that I just didn't remember. But take the time to capture those moments with your loved ones while they're still able to do that, and you will have those memories to hold on to. So that helps you get back to normal, being able to grab hold of those memories. And then I think realizing that, they're not suffering anymore and they're in a better place, you can gradually start to move forward and go on with your life, because you have to move forward. You can't stay there. It's okay to mourn, and no one can tell you how long you need to grieve the loss. You take the time that you need, but just know that you don't want to stay there because you want to move forward. And I believe that everyone that we lose wants us to move forward and live a life and be happy.
Yeah, I think reminding ourselves that what they would want for us, even if there's days when you're like, well, because not everybody has, a super close relationship. My mom and I were, I would say, average. We weren't at odds with each other, but we weren't like best of buddies. Even though
Mhm.
she would ever tell everybody, "This is my best friend, and I've known her forever," which made everybody laugh because everybody knew. Of course,
Was
you've
it
known me
true?
forever. Yeah, it's like you've known me longer than anybody else. So
Oh, that's funny.
yeah, it was just amazing how it always cracked people up. And then she would laugh, so it was always like I don't know, she always repeated that because it got a good reaction.
It's still cracking people up because here I am laughing. I didn't even know your mom.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I try to tell people to be prepared for them to forget the details of your relationship. Like my mom knew I was the fun person. I would take her
Mhm.
to the park to watch kids. We'd go to the pool during the summer, and she could soak her feet and watch. All of our outings were pretty, especially as she got more progressed, were all like kid related. She was a mom and a grandma, so that made sense. She couldn't, because she had a really big problem with visual processing. So there was a lot of things that she just resisted trying because she was
Mhm.
afraid of making a mistake or whatever. And that was just really frustrating for me. Like this show started because none of the traditional advice worked. We flunked all that really well, like flying flunking colors. And so I just learned like she was really happy. She wanted to sit around and shoot the breeze, which would be great, but she was at the point where she would ask me, "What have you been up to lately?" And I would tell her, "Well, it's Monday and I went to this meeting and then I came to visit you." I always gave her like a little short answer. I didn't tell her my whole day. And I'm
Mhm.
like, "What have you been up to?" And she'd be like, "Oh, I'm like, no, could you tell me? Like anything? I don't care if you told me you went skydiving yesterday, anything. Like, give me a little nugget to work with here. Yeah, it was really tough. So we'd go and watch kids and everything, and that's what we did. And she knew I was a fun person, so that's why I say, I went from daughter to best friend, and that was definitely an upgrade. So
Yeah, you take it, huh?
yeah, and it still makes me laugh and smile. So I think it helps if like you still worked, even if it was only part time. You didn't,
Mhm.
I know people that give up their careers because they don't have much of a choice, which we really need to
Right.
fix in this country. And I think that makes it a lot harder because now everything they've done every day for years is gone, and now they got to like rebuild. So I try really hard
Right.
to recommend that people they don't they don't get to the point where when their person's gone they have to totally rebuild, because that's tough.
Yeah,
But
it
this is
is.
this has been great. I hope the listeners have got some good advice on navigating multiple family members with some form of dementia. Because Lordy, I mentioned that I was doing this recording to the first person I was talking to this morning. They're like, they were a different kind of caregiver. They actually started out as a child aged caregiver, not for dementia, but other issues. And she's like, oh, Lordy, I can't even imagine. I'm like, me either. My mom and my grandmother didn't overlap very much. And so I can't, I'm sure my aunt and uncle can imagine, but I didn't have to deal with it too much. What is the name of your book?
It it is the amazing. Wait a minute, that's the wrong one. A mysterious wonderment when Alzheimer's disease becomes your word of the day. Then there's a children's book, The Amazing Adventures of the Jolly Heart Squad. Both are available on Amazon. I wrote the children's book to tell the story in a way that was fun, even though it's a difficult disease. So it kind of tells the story of a little girl and her suspecting her uncle may have Alzheimer's. And it's four characters. Her best friend is an elephant, because the symbol for Alzheimer's, the elephant never forgets. And then there is the frog. There's a story in my first book about the frog. Me and one of my little brothers, the one who got killed in an accident on Christmas, we accidentally killed a frog. We were throwing rocks.
Oh,
When
no.
we were kids, let me be clear. I don't want anybody to think that I'm an animal killer. We were like 9, we were like 7 and 10 or something like that. But anyway, the frog comes back to life and he's like the town know-it-all. And then there's Doc McMice, elephant don't like mice. So those are the main characters. And Dr. Theodore McMice teaches the little Jolly Heart Squad all about Alzheimer's. They visit the town of Cheddarville and they learn about Alzheimer's. And that's the kind of the premise for the children's book, so that it gives them factual information, but less frightening, I would say, because it's a fun story. So
We can all use a less frightening introduction to Alzheimer's.
yeah, I know, right?
Well, as the listeners know, I always link the books in the show notes, so you can click on those hot links and go to Amazon, grab those up. The kids' book sounds amazing. I'm sure the other book is good too, but you detailed the kids' book a lot more. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with the listeners.
Well, I appreciate you for having me. It was nice meeting you as well.
Thank you. Are you looking for additional advice, suggestions on a catch-up episode to listen to, or simply an easy way to get in touch with me? Then you definitely need to sign up for the weekly email newsletter. It is super short, chock full of excellent information, and I do not spam you at all. So the link for the newsletter is in the show notes. Just click on it, sign up, and you will not regret hearing from me every Wednesday morning. And now, here's a taste of what you can expect next Tuesday.
We just added Christy Byrne Yates this year, joined our management team, or the board of directors. She's my podcast partner, so she was working with us doing that. She helped run a book club we did with HFC a while back, so she's been hanging around. And we got different people who come in and they do different things. They run different projects, and then when it's over, then they move on. So we've had a lot of people come through the team. Right now there's like at least 10 of us. And then I have my interns. I work at a college, the campus nurse, and I offer an internship to students in the new media program. And so right now I have like 4 of them. 2 of them are working for All's Authors.
Nice.
So that's how we get things done. Everybody's a volunteer. We have a very small budget. We can always use money. So if people are looking to make, donations, you can think of us. But it takes a lot to get to do what we do.